I chose to review Laura Mulvey's essay on visual pleasure and narrative cinema. So, what visual pleasure and narrative cinema is it's when female characters are sexualized or objectified in order to appease men. So, movies mainly appeal to the male audience and they portray women as something there to do whatever a man chooses them to do, or to do whatever a man says, basically. So, examples of visual pleasure can be found in movies such as The Wolf of Wall Street, The Other Woman, and She's the Man, are the few examples that I chose to look at further. So, first off, Wolf of Wall Street. So, this movie is about the famous Jordan Belfort, and in this movie, he's played by Leonardo DiCaprio. And Jordan Belfort begins to work at a brokerage firm down on Wall Street, or it's not Wall Street, but similar. And he enters into the world of the stock market. So, he doesn't know much about the stock market, and he's trying to play by the rules and everything else, but he quickly learns that that's not how it works if you want to be successful. And then when the stock market crashed, he lost his job and he begins at a smaller firm, which he eventually builds into a big firm for himself, and he becomes very successful. And with all that success, he made millions of dollars. And when you have lots of money, you tend to buy things that you probably don't need, but they're things that you are able to buy. So, what he spent most of his money on was women and drugs, as many stockbrokers who are successful do in Wall Street. So, women were very sexualized within this film because they were seen as something you could buy, obviously, and then they were strippers and they had sex with the workers in the building along with Jordan Belfort, even though he was married. And they even had drugs done off of them, which not a great thing, but and then this film is very targeted to the male audience, and how it shows visual pleasure is the women were objectified, obviously, and then it's something that shows that it's something that men would aspire to become one day. They want all the women around them, want all the drugs around them, everything else along those lines. And that movie was a prime example of visual pleasure and narrative cinema. And then another movie, The Other Woman. This movie emphasized how men, again, treat women as objects and nothing more than just something to do in the meantime. So the main character, Mark, was married to a woman named Katie, and he was a very successful lawyer, and he began to date and sleep with his coworker Carly. And then Carly did not know he was married, and therefore when she found out, she confronted the wife, and again later they found out that there was actually a third woman in the mix. And this just shows that men see women as nothing more than an object, and they don't really care about their feelings all the time and everything else. And the woman got revenge on him, though, and they stole all his money and proved that he was a liar and a cheater and everything else. And finally, and the last example, She's the Man. This movie was more PG than the other two examples that I described, but it still shows that men think that they are superior to women. And the main character, Viola, who's played by Amanda Bynes, she wants to join the boys' soccer team at her school, but she's not allowed to, and the coach says no, and therefore she ends up posing as her twin brother, Sebastian, at a boarding school and ends up playing on the boys' soccer team there. She is just as good as the guys, and she just wanted to prove that. And then also she ends up falling for her roommate at the school, and she kind of changes her ways and acts in order to please him so that he will like her. And this is seen actually within a lot of films, that women kind of change their ways in order to please men and in order to get their attention, basically. Although that there is a lot of visual pleasure in films today, there are becoming more movies that are showing women off in a much better light. They're showing how empowering, smart, strong, and determined they are, besides just being beautiful and an object for men to play with. And some examples of these movies are things such as Wonder Woman, Legally Blonde, League of Their Own, and there are many more examples that show women in a much better light than something as just an object or sexualized and something for men to do. But visual pleasure is, again, when females are basically degraded in order to please the male audience.